Appetite for Horror.
In a distant land, Hell's Madam has risen again. And now she's back in business at the Bordello of Blood, where customers go in.
Evening, boys.
This is deep, but they don't come out.
Welcome to the podcast, Appetite for Horror, episode number 4. I already heard a kid crying, I think. My guest co-host, Vinny.
That's right.
Which is, I think this is perfect. This is almost a setup for a horror movie. You have sick kids around you. You may be eaten by zombies halfway through this interview.
Good possibility.
That may happen. So, welcome to the podcast, Appetite for Horror. Again, only 4 episodes in, so whether you've been along for these first 4 or you're brand new, my name is Brando. Been in radio for 20 years. This is a spin-off podcast of Appetite for Distortion, a podcast I've been doing for about 6 years with the Guns N' Roses theme. And something I do on that podcast that I'm going to do on this one is get listeners and friends be guest co-hosts. Because I love that. I want to talk about horror, not just with, I have no one to talk about it with, put it that way. Vinny, I guess, said goodbye to my wife before we started recording. And she's just not into horror. I don't know about yours. And just
Same thing. So
that's what this podcast came out of. Just an outlet for me to interview cool people. And just in a few minutes, we're going to interview Al Katz. He has so many titles from Tales from the Crypt, from producer to co-writer to showrunner, all these different things. So we're going to break down this his career and what's been going on. If you are coming over from Appetite for Distortion, we're going to talk to about Slash being on on being on Tales from the Crypt, his guest appearance. I mean, so many cameos. And I got to credit Vinny, and this is why I, invited you to be on the podcast with me, because I think you're slightly older. I'm 39. Are you 40 yet?
Yeah, I'm 41. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. The 2 years makes a difference because I grew up on Tales from the Crypt. I did. That's when HBO was kind of new, but I was obviously very young and not super into. I was into horror, but I was still afraid of it at times. But when you were telling me about this new podcast that Al has, How Not to Make a Movie podcast, I believe it's called.
Yep.
It's done super well about his movie the Tales from the Crypt movies. And I remember Bordello of Blood. I'm going to tell this also to Al and then Demon Knight. And obviously I remember the show, The Cryptkeeper, who everyone does, but I don't remember. And I found this out, the specific episodes. I just had no memory of it. And I didn't even think to look on YouTube. And I'm curious Al's opinion that I think every episode is on YouTube. I mean, not the highest of quality, but they're for free. And I'm telling you, I've been watching hours upon hours. I just moved from one part of Queens to the other, so it took us a while to get internet and everything. I was just on YouTube watching just these 10-hour literally 10-hour marathons of Tales from the Crypt, forgetting, other than Slash, Tom Hanks and just like all these A-list actors, Patricia Arquette. It's just absolutely incredible that all these actors were part of this horror series, and I'm just completely forgot. So now I'm like re-enjoying them. So that's what makes me even more excited to talk to Al in a few minutes. But I feel like you're going to help me because you remember everything. You're telling me about your favorite episodes. And so do you remember, give me a little bit of your history with the horror and the Cryptkeeper. Is that your favorite genre? Is it your favorite show ever?
Favorite show, definitely one of my favorite shows ever. I actually remember vividly when it came out because I started watching horror young. I got into Nightmare on Elm Street first, and I was watching the first horror movie I saw, although some might argue it's not horror. I saw Aliens when I was 5, and it got me hooked on horror since then. And I remember my mom said, "Oh, there's this new show coming on HBO Friday night. You might like to watch it." And I watched it that Friday night, saw the first episode, and yes, I fell in love with it. I watched pretty much the whole series. I will admit, and I might say this to Alan, that the final season, not their best work. I still I don't remember those episodes. But yeah, it's one of my top, certainly 5 shows of all time. I love it. I still watch it like you. I've been watching on YouTube as well. So yeah.
I'm back into it. I just can't believe it. Now it's like re-entered my favorite. It always was. I always had a soft spot, but I can't believe. I'm like, yeah, Tales from the Crypt, and I just never really processed. I'm like, wait a minute, I remember nothing. I'm watching these episodes, and I knew that the Cryptkeeper was all about those the dad jokes, the puns,
yep.
Which is just boys and ghouls, just brilliant. It was brilliant, but I completely forgot about the amount of cameos. Watching each episode, just almost like excited to see who's going to be in it. So yeah, I'm excited. I didn't want to wax too much, be too much of a fanboy, which I'm sure is going to come out anyway with Alan. I'm going to ask him how to say his name. It always says A.L. Katz.
Yeah.
At the beginning of the episodes, and he started season 3. So I'm really excited to talk to him, and I believe he is popping in right now. And we welcome. Oh, I should have asked you this before the off the air. So we know when we see Tales from the Crypt, when I see your episodes, it's A.L. Katz, right? Or do I call you Al Katz? Or is it Alan Katz? Mr. Katz? Katz's Deli. What do you like?
We're leaping into the stories immediately. Why I go by A.L. Katz? My friends call me Al, but a lot of people call me Al now. A lot of people call me A.L. When I got to Los Angeles in 1985, alas, I was not the first Alan Katz to land here. There was an Alan A.L.L.A.N. Katz who had, he had quite a resume. He had written for MASH, wrote for the Carol Burnett show. He had a screenplay that was going around town in 1985 when I arrived here called The Hunchback of UCLA. And it was a comedy and everyone loved it. And when I arrived in 1985, I had a script that was going around called Down to Earth. All right. So when I came in 1985, I had a friend from high school who'd become an agent in William Morris, and I've always been a writer. She said, you should try writing a screenplay. So I wrote a screenplay. She said, it's really, really good. You should come out and meet and greet people. And yeah, so I've another story into itself, how I ended up in Los Angeles. But the fact that there was another Alan Katz was when I walked into the first couple of rooms that I walked into, these executives would say, hey, nice to meet you. We really love your script, The Hunchback of UCLA. And the first couple of times I was stupid and I'd say, oh, that's not me. That's the other Alan Katz. So they'd look at me like, well, then who the fuck are you? And I said, I wrote this script called Down to Earth. And they'd go, I don't think we even read that. And that would pretty much kill the whole meeting. Then after that happened, a time or two, I got smart. Hey, this kid could learn. And they'd say, hey, and by the way, we really loved the big man, the Hunchback of UCLA. And I'd say, oh, well, thank you. I'm really glad you like that. The thing I'm going to pitch you today, I think, is even better. And so, at least, yeah, it worked out better. All right. So I ultimately, in the early years, I would occasionally get some of his residual checks. Not that I could do anything with them.
Oh, wow.
But I saw them and I know what he was getting
That's
on
funny.
Residual checks for MASH and all the shows that he had written on it. He was doing great. I don't think he got any of my residual checks because at that point there weren't any.
That's funny.
So that was a one-way street. And when the time came that I began to actually get produced credits, I didn't want to have to keep explaining. So I turned myself into AL, and no one has really known my name ever since.
Oh, I love it.
Boy, was that a long way to go for it? What should we call you?
I love that, though.
Talk. How about that? Start there.
No, I appreciate it, and I appreciate you using the word schmuck, because as a Long Island Jewish person, I'm sure I've known 1,000 Alan Katzes. So I always am curious why people might change their name, pen their name. I appreciate that you kept Katz. That's why I go by Brando instead of Brandon. I don't know, just little Vinny. Yeah,
let me add a couple of twists
Sure.
to the end of the name game story. There was, for a little while, there was yet another Alan Katz who aspired to be in the business and he could not get any attention. He was really a terrible writer and a really annoying personality. And he had this idea, which at the time just seemed so annoying, but as I think of it now, it's kind of inspired. He wanted to create a whole club of us, of Alan Katzes.
It's like the No Homers in The Simpsons.
Yeah. And at the time I thought that just sounded like a fucking nightmare. But at the end, actually, I thought there's a great story premise in there. You know, the name game and the first year that I was here, I took 1985, I took a class with the Groundlings, an improv class.
Okay, sure.
Great. That was so instructive. I mean, I was a drama major, so acting was something that I also did, but I'd never done improv before. And improv, the whole nature of yes and. When you are out there with someone else, the one word you cannot use is no. It ends everything. If I walk in and I say, hey, do you like my hat? You should say, yeah, and I love the tropical birds. What are the names? I go, oh, well, this is Elmer and that's Fudd. So you're always adding information. And this is the nature of collaboration to begin with. And the lessons that I learned, at the Groundlings were terrific. Excuse me. I ended up taking 2 classes, but the first class I took was taught by a woman named Phyllis Katz.
Of course it was.
Alan Katz was her brother.
Of course. I mean, I get annoyed when I get to meet another Brandon. I don't even know what your life is like. But we're in the public eye. Vinny McKeever, maybe I'll call you Vinny Mac, as your radio name for today.
Sure.
Mac.
Oh, I love it. And I really appreciate that story, because again, it's all connected, and I want to know your path to how you got to one of the main reasons why we're here today is to talk about Tales from the Crypt and your very successful podcast about
Thank you.
How not to make a movie podcast, which is just
somewhat ironic. Well, ironically titled and yet not. Oh, where to begin?
I'm looking forward to talking about that. But first, this is a new podcast, and if there are people coming over from Appetite for Distortion, which is how I originally reached out to you, because it was Vinny who's been a fan of my podcast, and everyone knows that I have what I call 6 degrees of GNR bacon. I mean, I love Guns N' Roses, but I'm not going to talk about just like the songs every time, or just about. It's got to be those little areas of pop culture that you may find stories about the band or these people that you might not know. And he's like, I've been listening to this great podcast, yours. And he's like, I know you're into horror. I know you want to start a horror podcast. You should reach out to Alan. And then you told me about, Vinny, if you want to say that the episode with Slash. If you want to tell us about that, because I want to start there, and I want to go back to your career.
Ed Tapia told the great story in season 1 of the podcast.
Yeah, exactly. And that's when when you actually were talking about it, how you were able to get Slash on the show, and it seemed like it was really just by chance. And of course, I remember the episode when it aired. I was a massive Guns N' Roses fan at the time, and having him on the show was like, one of probably my favorite show at the time. And then Slash on, it was like my 2 worlds colliding. If
it'll help any, the week he spent on the show, he was lovely. He was just a delightful person. It's funny. This week's the episode that drops at midnight tonight. We were talking to Ed Tapia, Gil and I. We were just hanging out, shooting the shit. And Ed, this week's episode is called Buried Bodies, and it has to do with knowing where all the bodies are buried because you help bury them. And that's the nature of a great assistant. is that, you know, someone who will be there to help you bury the bodies when it's time. And, you know, Gil and I, before Ed joined us, you know, we had good assistants, and then Ed Tapia joined our team. And, you know, Ed was more than just an assistant. Ed was a member of the team from the get-go. It's just a different way of operating. Anyway, so Ed's story is, in and of itself, is it, you want to know how to break into show business? Listen to Ed. Ed retold the story the other day in this week's podcast about Slash. And because Ed was really the one who got us Slash. I think Ed had become aware that he was a huge fan of the show, that he just loved the show. And I think it was one of the crew was friendly with him on some level and said, he's a real big fan of the show. He'd love to be on the show, is how it was put to Ed. And Ed said, oh, cool. And I think then he was given a phone number, said, yeah, if you call this number, you can set up a meeting. And he called the number and it's Slash. And so he's talking to Slash about being in Tales from the Crypt. And so, you know, Ed was looking to set up a meeting for sometime in the future. He wanted to come that day.
Oh, wow. He was eager.
And we were just about to start shooting the episode that he's in.
Oh. And
we kind of said, you know, and he just seemed so eager to do it. We thought, oh, cool. And we were doing a rock and roll episode. That was about to come up. And so we said, hey, man, we're going to cast in the episode. We're going to write you a part. And so we wrote that part specifically for him.
Nice. Okay.
And it had to do with the fact that because he wanted to be in the show, you know, he was such a fan that we just, okay, man, hey, you know, synergy. So he, you know, he really only worked, well, he only worked for 2 days, but he wanted to be there the whole time.
Well, that's cool.
And so he was there even on the days that he wasn't working because he just wanted to feel part of the larger creation, which of course he was. You know, he just wanted to be able to soak in every last bit of it. And he was, like I said, he was lovely. He was a joy to have on the set because he enjoyed the experience so much. You know, it's when you do a show for a long time, even a show that you love doing, like Tales from the Crypt, it's a job. And, you know, sometimes you forget what a special experience it is. And so it was great to be reminded by a guy who, look, this guy lives a rock and roll life. You know, there are so many people aspire to what he does, and he aspired to be to a degree to what we were doing.
Right.
And so everyone is really looking for somewhere else for, you know, for their satisfaction. You know, in a way, no one's really happy with what they got. They're always looking for, well, what else is there? What else is there?
You're right.
It's one of those strange things about us human beings. It's what makes us so much fun to write about. We're such a mess.
That's
almost
why I love
beyond
horror.
the reach of therapy and medication.
Oh, I'm on both.
And I say that as someone who is almost beyond the reach of therapy and medication. I say that jokingly because.
Oh, I know. Right on. I talk about the Appetite for Distortion podcast, you know, about therapy. So kind of why I did Guns N' Roses podcast, because more about the music, because they're all kind of have been through stuff, addiction and everything. So that's something I talk about, and I love those storylines and Tales from the Crypt. And for those who don't know, because Vinny had to remind me, I was telling him before he popped on, you know, I grew up on Tales from the Crypt. I'm 39. He's 41. But I go back and I just found myself, I was actually just rewatching Bordello of Blood, the movie that you worked on as well. I shouldn't say worked on, you wrote it. And I remember those. I remember Demon Knight, but I'm watching the episodes. I'm like, I remember nothing. It's crazy. So I'm like, I've been on a crazy binge watch this past week because I just moved in, just getting, you know, everything situated, just been watching nothing but Tales from the Crypt pretty much. And just like, wow, this person's in this episode, this person. So if you're not familiar, because when I posted this on Appetite for Distortion and Appetite for Horror, I know that can be confusing, sorry. It's In the Groove. That was the episode. What was that, like season 4. Might have been season 4. It should be on IMDb. Where is it?
I forget which season.
Yeah.
It was probably 5,
Okay, yeah, I
maybe
know why.
6.
Yeah, for some reason it's telling me it went in air December 21st, 1994. And let me see if you can hear this, because I'm going to play the clip of just the small part of Slash.
Oh, cool.
Don't talk back. Jesus, you believe that chick? Security. Like you need it. Up yours, pal. What'd you get last quarter? 30 share. What'd you get, mama's boy?
And he mouths "Mama's boy" again, and he's wearing the top hat. So that was it. It's on YouTube if you want to watch it, but it's a brilliant actor, and unfortunately, he's since passed away.
Yeah.
Correct.
And I'm like, why am I forgetting? I should get his name up here too, but I'm being stupid. Why is he not coming up?
Miguel, right?
Miguel Ferrer.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
Miguel Ferreira. Thank you,
Yeah.
thank you. What is IMDb picture? Did not look like him. I'm like, is that him? Yeah, Miguel Ferreira. I remember him so much from Hot Shots Part 2. That's what I remember him from mostly. But he's a brilliant actor. And Slash as Hank. So how did you come up with Hank for Slash? Do you remember that? Because I
Boy,
think that's one of the funniest parts. He's Hank.
That was whoa, that was so many blackouts ago.
I'm sure. But and before I forget this terrible joke, because the only other Guns N' Roses connection I can think of to Tales from the Crypt, I don't think Gilbert Adler is related to Steven Adler, but I saw the Adler. I'm Vinny's smiling. He's laughing. So now that we spoke about this last stuff, I want to go back to how you started out, because you said a point that I'm glad you did, because it's something I was thinking about last night as I'm rewatching Bordello of Blood. You know, I'm here. I've been radio for 20 years. I get to, I have a home studio now, which is great. I get to interview people. Awesome. Some people tell me that like I have a dream job. I really like it. I would like to make more money, but I like it. But then I look at what you've done and Tales from the Crypt, just that series, and going from episode to episode to see the A-list actors that you worked with, you wrote for, like that just seems like the dream job. And it was almost like it wasn't.
Oh gosh, yes. Oh,
okay.
No, yes. Oh, yeah. In so many ways, it's kind of strange how the stars lined up. I grew up an absolute fan of Bill Gaines's universe. Tales from the Crypt comic books. I mean, I'm 63, and I grew up. I was born in 59, so I grew up in just as the EC comics were transitioning into Mad Magazine, and Bill Gaines's whole world was I loved. At 6 years old, at Michael Gold's birthday party, his dad on a Super 8 projector played Laurel and Hardy's Big Business. They're Christmas tree salesmen in Southern California, and it doesn't go well. Something about the comic timing there just hooked into me. And because it's all an escalation gag, and it's terrific. It's great. It's
smart humor,
expert comedy timing. Everything you need to know about how comedy works, watch that. So at 6, suddenly I understood the nature. It's the physical comedy. It's not sophisticated, and yet it is. All right. At 9, I fell in love with Groucho Marx. And that was also key to, the evolution, because suddenly comedy as a weapon against the man. Suddenly comedy with a purpose. And that took hold inside of me. And so I went to undergraduate to Vassar College in Poughkeepsie.
Oh, wow.
And I was a drama major. I was a film major originally, but the guy who ran the film department, really nice man named John Stearman, was much more into experimental film. And I appreciate that, but I'm a storyteller. I got stories I got to tell.
Something more linear, not abstract.
Yeah. And so it wasn't the kind of film that I wanted to work on. So I became a regular drama major. And one of the things that they were really, it was very important was dramatic literature. Having a just incredibly firm basis in all the dramatic literature that came before you. One of the professors, my dramatic literature professor, was a guy named Everett Sprinshorn, who was one of the world authorities on Strindberg and Ibsen. And his lecture on Ibsen's Ghosts, the clouds parted, and I understood how storytelling works, but also how to message via your story, and how to get an audience into the palm of your hands and emotionally crush them, because that's what you want. That's what you need to do in order to drive home your point. I suddenly understood storytelling on a primal level. It took me a long time to figure out what to do with that knowledge, but so all these things are flowing around in my young head. And a friend from, and I've been toying with writing screenplays. I had, growing in Baltimore, from the time that I was 16, I worked for a guy who wrote and produced training films and educational films. When I was 18, I worked for a production company in Baltimore. They did political commercials and other kind of commercials. So I worked on a film set as a grip from the time I was 16, 17. So you
always knew that was the direction that you wanted to go in. That was the direction you always knew.
The first time I ever worked on a film set, it changed the way that I understood movies, because I suddenly understood the two sides of the camera. Literally from the first day that I was just humping cable all over a set, I didn't look at any movie the same way again. I suddenly appreciated the craftsmanship, the little teeny details. Just where are you gonna put the light? What kind of filter? What kind of gel are you gonna stick over the light? Stupid stuff. But suddenly, nothing on that you see is incidental. Ideally, it's all there because it's all part of the storytelling palette. Excuse me for a second. So I had the benefit of an education on multiple levels, filling my head with how to do it, plus this desire. And I had stories to tell. Well, more than anything, when I got to this town, I was here to do comedy. And the screenplay that I wrote, Down to Earth, was about a shock jock who he kind of destroys some listener who's convinced that aliens are real. And suddenly the shock jock, something happens to him where he realizes that guy's absolutely right. And so that's what I was selling originally. And then one of the first people that I met when I came to Los Angeles, the first week that I came to meet and greet, and found this place so nice, and the people were lovely, and man, it's great having smoke blown up your ass. It's a lovely feeling. I highly recommend it. And one of the people who I met that first week in 1985 when I was meeting and greeting was a guy named Gil Adler.
Okay.
And Gil read that first script and what else you got? And I pitched this other idea. Ultimately, it was called French Kiss, about an arranged marriage. And Gil and I developed that together. And he found the financing to pay me to write it. And so we became co-workers really as soon as I got here, but also we became best friends. And
that worked out.
That relationship lasted for a decade. And the thing that ultimately destroyed that relationship, the creative relationship and the friendship, really at the end of the day was Bordello of Blood.
Okay. So
And that is what that to a degree, that is a big part of what the podcast is really about. It's about that stupid fucking movie, ruined a lovely relationship, which when I turned around, no, I went 25 years. I never talked to Gil Landler for 25 years. Oh, once or twice, I think, just but really briefly, quickly, had nothing to do with each other. And when I decided, the reason that I did the podcast is because of a fan group called Dads from the Crypt.
okay.
And Jason Stein from Dads from the Crypt approached me. They wanted, their thing is they review all the episodes of Tales from the Crypt and they give parenting advice. And I thought that was such a funny idea that I thought, oh man, I'll do anything you want. That's such a funny idea. I'm there. I'm there for you. And so they had done an interview. They were reviewing an episode. They wanted to interview me as part of the review of the episode. I said, sure. And it was great fun. And afterwards they said, well, that's great. Hey, look, we're coming up. We're going to do a review of Bordello of Blood. You want to do another interview? And I said, guys, Jason, the story of the making of Bordello of Blood isn't some little interview. It's like a whole podcast unto itself.
Light bulb.
And that was really, yeah. And I had, as we range far and wide here, I spent 2 decades with a writer's block that I didn't even know I had. And you can see my credits kind of drop off for the better part of 2 decades. I vanished. And that was because I went through a writer's block that was attached to a deep, dark and darkening depression. Hey, I write about this. So this is, 3 days before Christmas, 2016, I came within literal inches of killing myself. And the good news, happy ending is I got better. I did something about it. I knew I had to do something. And so, yeah, I took positive actions and that has worked out quite well for me. I'm good now. But part of what I'd become quite convinced that I didn't have any more stories to tell. And the least interesting story of all was my own. When I got to the other side of the darkness, I realized that this was bullshit. And I had nearly bullshitted myself to death. Part of my getting better, I had a therapist who said, write stuff down. And I started to write stuff down. It just felt bullshit. And then it suddenly occurred to me, I had come within inches of if I had done this, I realized in the aftermath, I would have bullshitted myself to death. And that just made me laugh for a good 5 minutes when that occurred to me. And so I started writing a book called How to Live Bullshit Free, a practical guide to not killing yourself. And then I simply wrote out how I got to that place. And it turned out I was keeping a secret from myself for 45 years, something that happened to me when I was 14. And this is never a good thing to do. And so I admitted to myself that this thing had happened and that was liberating. And one of the things that I suddenly realized as I began to get healthy is that, one, I had a lot of stories to tell. My God. And losing 2 decades, now I've got promises to keep and miles to go before I sleep. It's madness, but I've got tons of stories to tell, including my own. And as I wrote this book, I devoted 26 pages to the making of Bordello of Blood. And so I simply took that and really that was the beginning of the storytelling. Having gone through what I've gone through, in telling the story of the making of Bordello, one of the things that I came to grips with was the fact that I was not a very good producer. In fact, I sucked. I was awful. That a lot of the things that happened on Bordello of Blood, I was a major cause of my own problems. And that was lack of confidence, but as I went back and I began to remember the story, we weren't even supposed to make Bordello. We were supposed to make a whole other movie called Dead Easy. And we were within 3 weeks, as the podcast tells the story, we were in 3 weeks of starting this other movie that was the direction that Gil and I were concerned as a creative partnership. That was the direction our creative life was supposed to take toward Dead Easy, a psychological thriller. And I'll point out right this second, on Saturday, December 17th at noon Pacific time, we're going to be holding a table read for charity of Dead Easy. We found a copy of the script, and we've transposed it into, we're not going to read the screenplay because, God, that would be hideously dull. It wasn't done. It wasn't finished, but we've transposed it into kind of a radio drama. We have actors. We've got great actors. We've got Tia Carrera and Jake Busey. Got John Kassir. Where the Cryptkeeper is going to be hosting the event, and we're going to be a whole new Cryptkeeper segment we're crafting for it. And John's playing the villain of the piece. And so this is a table read for charity. The charity is the Motion Picture Home, the MPTF. This is the organization that takes care of film folk like me in need when we're indigent, when we're older, and they're going through a terrible financial crisis. They're in desperate need of cash. And so we're doing a table read, and all the money is going directly to them. It's not going to go anywhere near us. And so we're doing this table read for charity. Okay. We were supposed to do this other movie called Dead Easy. That would have been a whole other direction our lives would have taken. But as we describe in season 1 of the podcast, the How Not to Make a Movie podcast, the circumstances so far beyond our control took over. And there's one point I say early on, if we were all Greek, this would be a tragedy. And it really was perverse. The reason that we made, when we got the mandate from Universal to make 3 Tales from the Crypt branded feature films, the deal was 3 completely different movies. And initially, Gil was supposed to direct the first one. Gil, I didn't want to write a monster movie, and Gil didn't want to direct a monster movie as the first one, because we had just done a bunch of seasons of Tales from the Crypt, which is to a degree a monster movie. We wanted to do something more psychological. And the mandate was do 3 different. So, but the partners, Joel especially, they were, rather determined as, hey, that's their right to do a monster movie first. And, among the scripts that we were tossing around was From Dusk Till Dawn, was Quentin Tarantino's script, and we almost did that. We came within inches of doing From Dusk Till Dawn as the first Tales from the Crypt movie.
Life's a game of inches. Wow.
Yeah. And it was the director who was attached at the time. The partners were unsure that he could do it. He's since turned out to be a very good director, but they didn't want to. They wouldn't commit to that, and so we wouldn't pull the trigger on that deal because we wouldn't commit to that director.
Wow.
And so we ended up doing. There was another script that was floating around that everyone really liked in the team, and that was Demon Knight, Cy and Ethan's script. And the deal was it had to be camera ready. The mandate came to do three movies, and the first one was go now. It wasn't develop this idea, spend a year developing, so that it fits well with the franchise. No, that was not the deal. Universal was ready to spend the money, and Joel was ready to take it and spend it. So, so we found the script that was most ready that we could make a deal on, and that was Demon Knight.
Okay. Wow. A lot to unpack there. And first, let me just say that I'm glad that you're here.
Oh, well, thank you. I'm glad to be here, damn it.
Well, there's never an easy way. Like, how do I bring up, and you'll understand in a second, this organically into a conversation, but I'm glad you do. And my guest, there's always a connection. So I lost my dad to suicide 9 years ago.
I'm sorry to hear that. God, I'm so sorry.
Well, thank you. He was 59. So, I mean, it's, and then for me, I was not wanting to be here for a decade, basically throughout my entire 20s. I don't want to say I ever I don't want to say I ever did made an attempt, but man, did I pray for cancer, the car accident. I'm like, I'm not supposed to be here. And now I have a wife that I married this year. I'm having my first kid in April. I'm here to talk to Alan Katz. I can call you Al, maybe. My friends call me Al, my friend.
Brandy, call me whatever the hell you want to call me, man. It's
So
good.
that's kind of what I talk about on the other podcast or whenever I've done radio, even classic rock radio that I've done. I whenever I can slide in my humor to talk about serious things, I will do that. So that's that. First things first. I know it's a difficult task because I don't want to ask you the same question that the dads on the crypt ask you. Be like, oh, can we just talk about, Bordello
I'll
of
make
Blood
up completely
quickly?
new answers. Don't worry about it.
No, I mean that in the sense of like, I know it's going to take, well, literally an entire podcast, entire season of a podcast to explain everything that went wrong. And that's what I want to, direct people towards anyway, to listen to yours. But is there a synopsis you can be like, other than the pressure of Universal, was it like,
Well, yeah.
what made it so bad? Was Dennis Miller that much of a dick? I mean, like what made it so difficult that it destroyed a friendship? Because I have worked on things where, whether in radio and you go in as friends and then something about it's like when you move in with a friend, it's just something about it. It's just not going to work out. But what are there certain bullet points or things you can point to? Be like, wow, this is where it really went wrong.
There's a creative partnership is a relationship exactly like a marriage. And, even good marriages, the unexpected happens and it can really rile and roil what makes the marriage work. That's kind of what happened here. We were on one path to do one movie and we saw a future. When Universal, the reason Universal pulled the plug on Dead Easy was around about the time that we were making that second movie, a brand new studio called DreamWorks had just come into being.
Brand new.
And Steven Spielberg had ended his deal with Universal and he now was DreamWorks. And this was very hard for Universal because he made a lot of money for them. And as DreamWorks began to say, hey, we're DreamWorks and create relationships with talent, Universal was desperately afraid that Steven Spielberg would reach out to Bob Zemeckis. Steven was Bob's mentor, and cut that deal, and they'd lose another huge. They'd lose the Back to the Future franchise guy, So they approached Bob. They said, Bob, what can we do to make you stay? And whatever that deal was, one of the parts of the deal, it was just a deal to get Bob to stay. It nothing to do with anything else. He said, and again, Bob's a lovely, loyal man. He's love working for Bob Zemeckis, the most wonderful collaborator. We talk about that endlessly in the podcast. Hey, he's always been incredibly loyal to Bob Gale, his first writing partner, and always looking for ways to put a couple of dollars in Bob's pocket. And as part of that deal, he said, you could buy the first script that Gale and I ever wrote at USC. It's called Bordello of Blood. And that was it. The whole point for $500,000. And so the point was just to stick some money. It was a favor done in the ways that favors are done. A lovely gesture. Universal now is sitting with $500,000 that is just spent on a script. Well, it's going to go down the toilet. That's nothing's going to happen. A very smart business move. They looked and realized, hey, that Bob Zemeckis guy, he's executive producing a movie that we're producing called, well, who cares what that movie's called? We've only spent, $50,000 on that script. Screw that. We'll just write that off their budget. They're now going to make the thing that we just spent $500,000 on. And so from a corporate point of view, I cannot question them. And hey, suddenly we were doing a horror movie script with Bob Zemeckis and Bob Gale's name on it. That's worth a lot more than my name or Gil's name or TJ Kelly's name. The guy who wrote the original Fat Tuesday that Dead Easy was based on. It's a completely savvy business move from Universal's point of view. What the hell do they care? But that same, I don't care, attitude towards our movie permeated everything. because suddenly it didn't matter what the movie was. It was a deal. Well, that was kind of the way the first one went too. The compounding problem was that when they pulled the plug on Dead Easy, we had been in New Orleans because this was a story that took place in the swamps. We'd been there for months prepping it. We had a release date. And when Universal pulled the plug and said, you're not doing that movie, you're doing Bordello of Blood, our release date didn't change, and neither did our production schedule. And now we were 3 weeks in front of production on a movie, the script we'd only just been handed. And it was a student script. Hey, Bob Z and Bob Gale, very talented men, but it's a student script. This was before they learned how to be talented writers. And this was a student script. And it was not camera ready. But we had 3 weeks to rewrite it the best we could, to cast the thing with a script that really was going to be hard to cast because it's just not written very well, but it had Bob's name on it. So, that really worked. And then a compounding problem. Yeah, we weren't doing the movie in New Orleans. We assumed we'd at least be in Los Angeles, but Joel, this is where, Joel, the whole experience of working with a Joel Silver is an experience unto itself. A lot of the first season of the podcast, Joel figures very prominently. He's a fascinating character to work with and for, and there are pluses and minuses, but there are pluses. And as hard a person as Joel can be to work with and maddening, most of us would work with him again if we had the chance to. It's bizarre. Joel asserted himself repeatedly at this point. He was always at war with the IA, the union that represents our crew. And it was always a fuck me, no fuck you. And this was the time to go fuck you.
I'm already frustrated. I'm already frustrated with this. And you're like barely into the story. Like I kind of know what you're talking about, just what people try, I'm certainly not at your level, but being at radio stations and a certain program director is a certain way. And you're just like, I'm just here to tell a story or to do a job. And you're just here to tell, make this great movie. And you're having all these different, cooks in the kitchen. And just
Joel, the reason we went to Vancouver, we made the movie in Vancouver only just to go to say fuck you to the IA. So we left our crew and a lot of our departments who were, like special effects makeup. We took that to Vancouver. And we took it. And again, we were supposed to be shooting in the swamps because we did that so we'd have as much daylight as we needed so we could create dark as needed. We were going to shoot in July. Well, now we're shooting July in Vancouver. We're shooting a horror movie in Vancouver. One thing that horror movies need a lot of, if you're not in an atmospheric place like a swamp, is night. And one thing you don't get a whole hell of a lot of when you're that far north at the height of summer is night. And so Joel's fuck you to the union bit us in the ass repeatedly. And we tell the story in the podcast. Then Joel was determined to cast our 3 leads. Now, why Dennis Miller is the lead of Bordello of Blood? To this day, I couldn't tell you.
Wow. Okay.
Dennis Miller, we never understood that decision ever for 1 second. Dennis is not, our audience did not care about Dennis. Dennis, very talented man doing what he does, but that's not what our audience was going to come to Bordello of Blood for. I don't know why Joel insisted on Dennis. Dennis did not want to do our movie. He so did not want to do our movie that when the offer went to him, the $1 million was Dennis's idea. And I think Dennis put that on the table because he assumed no one in their right mind would pay Dennis Miller $1 million to star in a movie. Dennis Miller never starred in a movie before. He had done small parts. There was no basis to pay Dennis Miller $1 million to be in any movie.
He was from SNL. That was
SNL, and he had at that point he was doing a show on HBO. On HBO.
Okay.
And hey, man, great at that, but it's not $1 million worth. I don't know why Joel said yes to that. There's a thing called breakage. Okay, sometimes, usually we're if you're going to hire actors out of your budget, you'll go to the studio or the guy with the money, you'll say breakage, and they'll go, all right, here's some extra money off the top of you. It's not on the budget. So we went to Universal. We said, can we get some breakage for Dennis? They said, well, we don't want Dennis Miller. There's nothing to us. And so we were a $12 million movie, and that extra $500,000 came out of our $12 million budget to pay for an actor that we did not want. We wanted Dennis Baldwin. That's who we had read and who we were ready to cast.
Okay.
And so we wanted Dennis Baldwin. We'd have paid him the $250,000. Yeah, I think it was $500,000 in the budget for that. Yeah, $500,000 for the lead. No, but so we paid $500,000 out of our budget. Hey, where was all the money? Special effect makeup. We're a monster movie. We're a vampire movie. So that's where we put the money. Well, it all came out of that to pay for an actor we didn't want. Erica, we understood a bit. We had another actress in mind, but Joel wanted to pay. He wanted Erica for reasons. And she also, we had 125 budgeted. She wanted to, we wanted, I forget what it was, 250, and she wanted $500,000. So it was another 250 that was not in our budget, and we couldn't get any breakage. So we spent $750,000 for actors that really we didn't necessarily want. I mean, Erica is okay, good name for us, but she brought baggage that we talk about in the podcast. She didn't want to do that movie either. She accepted a role in a movie called Bordello of Blood and decided she wanted to be an actress. Who she didn't want to play those kind of roles anymore. Okay. The final choice was the backbreaker. And that's the one I had no axes to grind. Really, I try to be as fair as possible to Joel. Very difficult person to work for, but yeah, there's another side to that story, and you got to understand Joel in the context of Joel. He's not an insurance salesman. He's an impresario in show business. Okay, it's the nature of this beast. Mm-hmm. Even Dennis was problematic, but Dennis, hey, it wasn't my idea to hire Dennis. It was my boss's, but once he was hired, he's my responsibility. And I don't think I handled Dennis with any aplomb whatsoever. I think I blew that. And I think that was a lack of confidence, but also a lack of, I didn't want to be there doing that goddamn movie. I just didn't, something in me just didn't give a shit.
Just all these people just didn't want to do it. I mean, it's just
no, literally, this was a movie that we went and made, and nobody who made that movie wanted to make it. Yeah, I'll bet some of the Canadian actors were happy to have the gig, but they didn't care. No, literally, this was a movie that we made, really, and nobody organically thought, this is a story that we must tell. Let's go forth and tell it. That never happened for this, ever, for 2 seconds, ever.
Not even Corey Feldman, who has his history in horror. Was he excited to be there?
We had an ongoing relationship with Corey because he was part of the extended family.
Yeah.
Corey had worked for Dick Donner. And Dick is such a lovely man. Oh, wow. He was the kind of guy who would pick up strays and orphans and, just be there for them. And he was always worried about what Corey was going through. And certainly Corey, oh man, show business was really not good to Corey. Growing up, yeah.
He speaks his mind a lot. I know. I don't want to necessarily speak on his behalf, but yeah, I know he tweets a lot, and he was ahead of the game with a lot of the stuff that's going on in LA, and that's coming out now. The Me Too stuff. It's not just to women; it's to everybody, and it's you hear the stories about Brendan Fraser, and it's scary. Corey was wonderful.
He's whenever he worked on an episode of Crypt, always the consummate pro. Whatever the oddities of his life, when he walks on the set, he's a total pro, and that's all I care about. I honestly, it's neither here nor there to me what happens in their life. Hey, live and be well, as long as you don't hurt anybody. It's nothing to me. when you walk onto a set and I'm working with you, I expect you to bring all the professionalism that I'm trying to bring. And it's ultimately, it's a team effort. It's the goal is for the sum to be greater than the parts.
Yeah.
And in order for that to work, you have to kind of let go of yourself and see you as part of this collective. You know, the World Cup is going right now. And one of the things that's beautiful about, you know, why it's the beautiful game is when, never mind the goalkeeper, but when 10 people are moving down a pitch and the ball is moving between them like they're all thinking the same thought. That's how a film room ideally works. There's just a lovely creative intimacy.
Well, I don't want you to spoil, because again, go to the podcast and hear the entire story, which is crazy. And Vinny, please jump in whenever you want, because we want to talk about just Tales from the Crypt. I guess the good times, you know, that weren't as stressful.
But that was the thing that made Bordello so stunning, and why it was the end of a relationship.
In contrast to everything else that happened. Yeah.
All right. Like I said, when I grew up, I loved Bill Gaines's universe. I ended up partnering with Gil. Gil, you know, we wrote together. We did a couple of episodes of Freddy's Nightmares together, and Gil directed some of that. You know, Gil, because he's a producer first, and he's an amazing producer because he trained to a degree as an accountant, so he understands. Excuse me. If you have $1, you better not spend $1. You don't have it. If you can do it for 99 cents, that's even better. And so he's just a very smart producer. He also understands, because he's also a very creative person too. Yes, you need to problem solve in order to keep within your budget. Simply saying no doesn't necessarily solve the problem. Creative problem solving to stay within the budget is how you do it. And that's how we produced Crypt. Prior to getting Crypt, the year before I got Crypt, about a year and a half before.
And you came on season 3?
Yeah, we came on season 3.
Okay.
I was unemployed, and there used to be a thing called the Cable Ace Awards.
Yeah. Yeah.
Remember those?
I do.
And one year I was a writing. I was a writing judge on the Cable Ace Awards. You know, a hotel room in Century City, the Century City Plaza, that's no longer there. 12 unemployed writers, because of course we're sitting here judging other writers because we're unemployed. And we were going to be there for 8-9 hours, and they give us a list of everything they were going to be looking at, and you know, a lot of it fairly standard fare, broad, you know, all the stuff that was on cable at that time. The first 3 things we were going to be watching, the first hour and a half, were the first 3 episodes of Tales from the Crypt. Dick Donner's Dig This Cat, He's Real Gone, Bob's All Through the House, and Walter's The Man Who Was Death. Amazing episode. But before they started rolling the videotape for us, 12 writers saw that 90 minutes of a horror show for HBO. We thought, here's 90 minutes we'll never get back. Every last one of us expected this to be a waste of 90 minutes. From the moment that Dick Donner's Dig This Cat, He's Real Gone began to roll, you couldn't, not a word was said. We were silent because we were mesmerized. We all loved it. But you could kind of hear our minds rolling, and each one of us was thinking the same thing. This is fucking brilliant. Get my ass on this show. Who do I gotta fuck to get on this show? It was literally, we all saw that this was a great show. This is a show you'd want to do. And I was one of the writers thinking that thing probably harder than anybody. But we all agreed that this was fantastic. We gave it the Ace Award for writing. Hands down. Nothing else compared to how much we enjoyed that. A year and a half later, Gil and I, Gil had a couple of meetings already. We had one more person had to sign off, Barry Josephson at Joel Silver's office at Silver Pictures. and I'm standing in the boardroom at Silver Pictures waiting to have one last meeting with Barry, because then I was going to be the story editor. And it was the most improbable thing I could imagine. How was I standing in the boardroom at Silver Pictures looking at stacks? They had hardbound copies of all the EC comics, Tales from the Crypt, Vault of Horror, the Westerns, the science fiction comics.
That's cool.
Love comics. I mean, they published everything. They had it all there because Joel had the rights to it all. And, Joel's goal was to do Tales and then do all the other ones too. So, one kind of understood as one stood there that if one could get into business with this could be a business that would last a long time. And to have found myself standing there was remarkable. I almost unfathomable to go from thinking, get my ass on this show, to being one meeting away. Gil and I told the story in episode 1 of season 1 of the podcast. Barry kept us waiting for an hour. Now, this was not unusual. Being kept waiting when you were at anywhere at Silver Pictures, waiting for Joel was, man, you could spend a day waiting for Joel outside his office, cooling your heels. An hour waiting for Barry was relative nothing, but we were not practiced yet. We had not learned the fine art of cooling your jets. And Gil, especially, me, I could see the promised land. Hey, I am Moses, man. I'm going there. I'm going to the promised land. And Gil is getting angry and angry, saying, "Oh, fuck this shit. We're walking. I ain't doing this. Fuck this shit." He's going to blow the whole thing off because we're being treated rather disrespectfully. Yeah. And I'm going, no, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter, man. And I'm saying, no, just give it time. Just give it time. Finally, an hour. And literally on the stroke of hour, I can't argue with Gil anymore. I can't convince him anymore. We're literally about to walk out the room when Barry Josephson walks in. And the meeting with Barry lasted 2 minutes. That's it. Basically, and it was for me to pitch my ideas about how I wanted to revive the franchise, the Tales from the Crypt franchise. But what I was really there to pitch was I wanted to invigorate the Cryptkeeper. My question to Barry was, I wanted to know, what does the Cryptkeeper do when he's not being the Cryptkeeper? When he punches out at the end of the day and he goes home to his real crypt, what does he do? What are his hobbies? What are his likes and dislikes? Who are his friends? Yeah, what does he talk about? What does he think about? And that tickled Barry to death and said, yeah, okay, let's do this. And by the time Gil and I returned to Gil's house, the deal was in negotiation.
There's definitely such a big difference in the Cryptkeeper those first couple of seasons. And then when you came on, he just becomes so much more of a character. And rap videos and guest appearances. I forgot the death from Bill and Ted was with him. Those
are always the most fun because first of all, working with Bill Sadler is always a hoot. I love Bill. Bill just did an episode in the second season, just talking to Bill about his process and his craft. He's a lovely guy and such a craftsman. And he's in one of my favorite episodes, the man who was death as he's just wonderful in that as an executioner in a state that suddenly outlaws capital punishment. So he takes it upon himself to execute people, and then capital punishment comes back and they catch him. And he becomes the first guy that gets executed because capital punishment is back. It's hilarious. And Bill is wonderful. And it's just.
And I forgot that he was also the almost in the same similar kind of role, but the mummy in Bordello of Blood. That was again things that came back because I just started rewatching. I'm like, oh, that's kind of like a similar joke that was used in an episode that they're bringing into the movie, but that's what you always do. You want to have callbacks to the show.
Here's something you have to go to YouTube and Two-Fisted Tales. And if you look for Two-Fisted Tales, this was another show that we were supposed to do. They did a 2 episodes. It was supposed to be for Fox. He never did it. but we had to create a wraparound character. And so we created this character named Mr. Rush. And we shot these the first season I was on Crypt. And Bob Z directed the wraparounds. And Bill said we hired Bill to play this Mr. Rush character. This guy is kind of it kind of takes off where Dr. Strangelove ends, the kind of madman in a wheelchair. And here's a guy, the Mr. Rush character, you could not experience more pain than he'd ever experienced. Yeah, you were in battle, but he threw himself on a live hand grenade just to see what it would feel like when it blew up. He'll suffer more than you could ever suffer because his dick is bigger. And Bill Sadler was so funny doing that. We scripted stuff, and then he began to improvise stuff off it. And it was so much fun that afternoon working with Bill Sadler and Bob Zemeckis and the crew that he put together. One of the treats of doing Tales from the Crypt was, look who you got to work with.
Everybody.
Look who you got to work with. I'm hanging out, having a laugh with Bill Sadler and Bob Zemeckis. And when I went aboard the first season, the last episode of that Two-Fisted Tales thing, ultimately, when we came aboard, it was supposed to be that third season was supposed to be Tales' last. And
oh wow,
the episode Yellow that Bob directed was supposed to be the last episode ever of Tales from the Crypt. But during the season, we got the budget under control, and that was one of the things that was why they hired Gil. Because after season 2 went $1 million over budget and no one was there to cover it. And so they hired Gil to really get that money back. And not only were we doing it for a much lower budget than they'd ever done it for before, but we went after actors and stars. We committed to that, and we got them. And suddenly, doing Tales became a thing in this town, and we got a hold of really terrific actors on a regular basis. And so HBO renewed us for a couple of seasons. Well, for one season, guaranteed, and there was a possibility of a second. But so when we did Bob's episode Yellow, that wasn't the end. That was going to be a celebration of, hey, the more the merrier. We keep it going. But before we could get there, what Bob had in mind, one of his favorite films when he was a student at USC was Stanley Kubrick's Paths of Glory.
Okay.
And he wanted to recreate Paths of Glory in this episode of Crypt. Well, Kirk Douglas stars in Paths of Glory. It's a World War I story in the trenches. He wanted Kirk Douglas for this. Kirk was, I think, represented by William Morris at the time. The problem was the script that they had written during season 2 was just not good enough. And so it was written by 2 big feature writers. It was just badly written. It just didn't understand. It's a character piece, and you gotta give 3 dimensions to the characters, not 2. As the story editor, it was my job to fix the script and therefore get Kirk Douglas. And I did. And so because, my fix to the script got Kirk, Bob became, a fan. And, he was lovely. He would have been lovely anyway, but he became that much more of a collaborator because I had been there for him.
You showed him that you can do it. You can get what he wants.
The next episode that he did 2 seasons later was going to be his last episode ever, was the You Murderer episode. And that was the quintessence of the Bob Zemeckis collaborative experience. It's challenging in all the best ways possible. It's challenging in the hardest ways possible too. This is the standard operating, the way it works. Bob was going to do the last episode of the season, and so Gil and I went up a couple weeks before we started working on his episode, started writing it, to hear what Bob wanted to do, so we'd know what to write. And we had lunch at Bob's place outside of Santa Barbara, and then we pushed the lunch aside, and Bob sat back and said, "Guys, here's all I know. I want to do a subjective camera show from the point of view of a dead guy." Okay, subjective camera, that means we're just one shot, one point of view, well, no coverage, one character's point of view exclusively. All right, that's tricky enough, but doable, but dead guy? What? And, it's an impossible request to a degree, but that's what he's after. It's the impossible request. But then he had to make it harder. He said, oh, and I want the dead guy to be played by Humphrey Bogart. So that every time the subjective camera dead guy point of view passes a reflective surface, we're going to see Humphrey Bogart, a clip of Humphrey Bogart. So we're going to have to figure out a way to get in and get out. That's what I want to do, guys. And then he asks the question, that's the quintessential Bob question. He asks, how are we going to do this, guys? Now, Bob's not going, I got this wild idea, you all figure it out and I'll sit in my trailer. Bob has plenty of ideas how to do this, but he's putting it out there on the table for the entire creative team to contribute to.
That's what you want.
To claim a little ownership of, no, not a little, total ownership. And that's what happens. This is no longer, well, this is this thing of ours, and it becomes ours. And it's an amazing thing to watch when you get a whole group of people doing this collaborative, creative thing together. There were no bad answers. There were answers to these questions that might not satisfy all of our needs, but hey, there might be something we could take from it. So no one sat back going, oh, I don't want to embarrass myself because it's a dumb idea. There were no dumb ideas. And so literally it uninhibits everybody.
That's the environment you want. It really is the environment you want. I think it all, because you don't want to be afraid to put your ideas out there, and you never know what's going to springboard to another idea. You want everyone to have feel worth.
I mentioned that when I came to town, I took improv classes, and the whole nature of improv is yes and. Right. No ends the creative conversation right there. Do you like my hat? You're not wearing a hat. Boom. Yeah. It ends right there.
And I've got to say too, Alan, the You Murderer episode is like probably the most, I think, innovative episode of the entire series. It really is incredible.
It was hard to do.
Brandon, yeah, if you haven't watched it, Brando, you definitely got to check it out. It is incredible.
It was a real creative challenge from start to finish.
Yeah.
And that's the joy of working with Bob Z. I mean, hey, Bob Z wanted to do, the first thing was get an actor simply by writing the script better. All right, but that's not an unusual challenge. But then he wanted to recreate World War I France in Simi Valley. And the challenge wasn't so much, well, it was to everyone else to create a World War I episode on a budget. Yeah, and we did that.
I love it. And Vinny, I want you to ask, because you're the one who remembers more of specific episodes, but just
ask away, Vinny, man.
But while it's on the tip of my tongue though, because I guess that was so funny, because again, you get to work with everybody. You go back like, whoa, it's everyone who's who. And I was watching the episode, I think it was This'll Kill Ya. I think I think that was the episode where it says Tom Hanks is in it. Yeah, and he's in it for like 2 minutes.
He directed the episode, and so the deal is he could you direct, but you have to be in a small part. Michael J. Fox, we made the same deal with him.
Okay, and because Vinny and I off air, we were talking about the Arnold Schwarzenegger episode, and he just only directed it, but he wasn't in it. So that was
before my time. We made better deals with our actors who wanted to direct. Yeah, sure, but you got to show your face a little bit. Come on, man.
Oh, okay, I gotcha. All right, so Vinny, what specific? Well, we got the man here. What episode?
What do you want to know
about?
Yeah, sure. Actually, one of the things, certainly when you guys came on board, the series definitely got more, I would say, comedic. Those first 2 seasons were very dark. So was that something that you guys were tasked with doing, or did it just naturally come to you?
What I loved about Bill Gaines's world, what I felt was missing, was that a sense of wicked fun. And they got the wickedness, and there was the darkness, and there was the irony, but it because they weren't running it like a TV show, there was no one managing the franchise. And so there was an inconsistency simply because they weren't running it like a TV show. And what Gil and I brought was a TV show management. And one of the things that you do in a TV show, what an audience tunes in for a TV show is in essence, the same thing every week to a degree. A serialized story, yes, you want to advance the story, but it's the same visceral experience. It's this kind of story is this kind of visceral experience. That kind of story is that kind of visceral experience. But so you have to do, this is what your audience wants. And so it's learning how to do this so it doesn't get boring. I completely lost the thread of your question. What were you asking, Vinny?
Just it became, when you guys came on board, it did become a little bit more comedic.
So,
And to kind of piggyback on that, I'm curious because the voice of the Crypt Keeper changed when you came on. He was definitely a little more quieter, and then he just became a little bit more, I don't know, lively. So I don't know if that kind of is the same with Vinny's question, where it becomes a little bit more comedic and he becomes more of a character.
John also was the first 2 seasons, the Crypt Keeper was pretty much, most of the segments he's wearing the same costume, sitting in the same set, pretty much, cycling through the same half dozen puns. They had done what, 6 + 18 is 24. You'd kind of written them into a corner. Where else were you going to go? And because I was asking the question, what does he do when he's not the Crypt Keeper? Suddenly we were talking about, hey, he's a wine aficionado, because he likes Beaujolais. We had him. He had friends like, when we did the sequences where Bill Sadler worked, where he plays the Grim Reaper and he plays the Mummy. That incredible fun to give the Crypt Keeper a chance to stretch out. It's because the Crypt Keeper, like I said, he's the franchise. It was when we expanded the franchise really that made the feature films happen. It was because, the stories and we were getting actors, but it was really the visibility of the Crypt Keeper, maybe more than anything else, is what did it. A couple years ago, M. Night Shyamalan got the rights to the EC Comics. People have been wanting to redo Tales from the Crypt ever since. And the people who are most interested right now in Tales was not our original audience. It's mostly the children of our original audience who saw it, a lot of them, as kids. And it was the thing that they were sometimes allowed to see, or they saw it, when they
I feel like kind of like me, honestly, because again, I was really young. I was born in '83, and you started in '89.
We were making them then. That's and everything old is new again.
Yeah,
and there was something. I lost my train of thought.
No. Well, I'm glad you brought it up, because that's
time for some more marijuana, apparently. I mean that literally. It's
honestly, bro.
I live in California, man.
Hey, it's legal here in New York, man. So that's usually my excuse when I forget something. So I'm glad I haven't forgotten.
Oh no, actually for me, I remember more when I'm doing. In fact, it's funny. We had to push back this morning because my tennis was pushed from yesterday to today. I use Durban Poison before I play tennis because it focuses my game so incredibly.
Nice. So, see, sometimes like I'll say this. I've noticed I've tried smoking before I do a podcast, and it does help my train of thought, but I also get severe cotton mouth, so it's kind of like a weird balance. So it's probably not the best idea.
That's why I drink a lot of water, man.
Right. But you touched on something, and it's kind of like how maybe my last question, because I can keep you here for a whole other season. And Vinny, I want you to ask whatever you want to ask, but it's you mentioned something about what M. Night, I think I was saying it wrong all these years.
Oh, yes.
Shyamalan.
That was my train of thought. Well, M. Night, yes. M. Night.
Like, is he, because that got thrown out. Like, that's not how.
Well, no, his problem was this. I that's where I lost my train of thought.
Okay.
M. wanted to do Tales from the Crypt. He got the rights to the comics, but the Crypt Keeper is not owned by by Bill Gaines' family.
Mm.
Oh, wow.
The Crypt Keeper in the comics is a white dude with stringy hair. It's not the Crypt Keeper. That was something that Kevin Yeager physically created. Now that's the puppet. And then it wasn't, then it's just a puppet until John Kassir gave it the voice that he gave it. So 1 + 1, now you get the beginnings of the puppet, of the character of the Crypt Keeper. Um, in our first episode of season 2, we have an interview that we did. Gil, John Kassir, Kevin Yeager, and I talked for the first time ever. We were the 4 people who created what we were all talking about today, the Cryptkeeper. Because then I put words in the Cryptkeeper's mouth that hadn't been put into his mouth before. And we took him from a puppet that talked about this to a character that talked about anything he wanted to.
Yeah.
And so suddenly the character went from being, the puppet to the Cryptkeeper character. And Gil produced them all, and he directed a lot of them. And that too is a vital element to what you see and what we all understand this character to be. So the Cryptkeeper is I should also point this out. It was a great conversation, the 4 of us talking about this thing that we collectively created. We had never talked about it before, about this thing that we did together. Not a one of us owns a piece of the Cryptkeeper. Joel Silver does.
The one that's hard to work with?
Yes, and the thing is that Bill Gaines's family do not like Joel. They're very unhappy with Joel, and they will never make a deal with Joel ever again.
Oh my God.
Well, that means that literally the Tales from the Crypt and the Cryptkeeper are pretty much divorced.
So
now,
Alan, is that why it's so difficult to get it on a streaming
that's
service
why
right now?
that was M. Night's problem.
Yeah.
He didn't realize that he had Tales from the Crypt. He did not have the Cryptkeeper. And the strange thing is, without the Cryptkeeper, you really don't have the franchise the way the world understands it. If you try to present Tales from the Crypt without the Cryptkeeper, the world would look at you and go, no. That's not Tales from the Crypt. Who's that asshole introducing this show?
It's just an anthology horror film, and there are plenty of those. But yeah, the Cryptkeeper, that's what I loved about the series. Yes, the writing, especially when you came on, is you could see lines where there's always a twist or a betrayal. There's things, but each story is so different. The setting is, you can be in the Old West, you could be the present day 90s, you can be in a radio station, all these different things. But it was the constant of the Cryptkeeper.
They're morality tales. And
bookending it. You wanted that. You loved the story in the middle, but just to have it bookended each time by the Cryptkeeper was just, this is Tales from the Crypt.
The trick was, our deal with Bill Gaines was that we had to use the titles of the comics.
Okay.
But beyond the title, we weren't obligated to do anything. And that was smart on Bill Gaines's part, because really the comic books, if you're trying to just script that out, that's 6 minutes of story tops.
Yeah.
And the structure was usually, you're arriving at the penultimate moment before the punchline, and then you go back and you hear, oh, here's how we got there. And then you get to the punchline, and it's this ironic moment of gore. The punchline to a morality tale. The guy who wants to be head of the company ends up getting his head cut off, and it's now outside the company.
Right.
You got what you wanted, pal. Just not the way you wanted it. Yeah.
And the Cryptkeeper being like, too fucking bad at the end of every episode.
He's the one, setting it up and then paying it off at the end, and kind of telling the audience, we're laughing at the same assholes together.
Yeah. Yes.
And the Cryptkeeper wasn't there to so much to scare you as to invite you into being part of this wicked fun.
Yeah.
He was your co-conspirator.
I like that. Vinny, what do you got? You have the memory of it all.
Yeah, I mean, just one other question I had, Alan, specifically was, I know you weren't around when Arnold directed the episode, but I think he was the only one who interacted with the Cryptkeeper in the opening and closing segments. Did anyone else try to do that when you were on board? No.
Okay. And that was, that was it was like the one time they suddenly grasped that what their franchise was. That the Cryptkeeper was elemental to what they had, but they didn't fully grasp before Gil and I came aboard. Really, the strength of their own franchise. This happens sometimes.
Yeah.
It's the synergy of when you hire the right people for a job, and suddenly something that was okay kicks it up a notch. And it was just the synergy of Gil and me and this particular piece of material. what made that especially cool at the time that Tales from the Crypt happened. TV and film were two entirely different worlds. They did not cross. It's not like it is today when it's mix and match. It doesn't make any difference.
Right.
And you'd get the occasional Tom Hanks or Robin Williams who would go from TV into film. If you were going from film into TV, that meant your career was
It was
going down the
demotion. Yeah,
shitter.
yeah.
So these two worlds did not cross in that way. HBO had done a couple of TV series. They had First and 10. They had Brian Benben's show.
Dream On.
It was nudity.
Dream
and,
On,
and
I remember.
they'd say the words fucking shit. That was the only thing that really separated them from regular TV shows. And then suddenly the executive producers, Joel and Dick, approach HBO with the idea of Tales from the Crypt. The deal was this was not going to be a dumb little TV show. It was feature films. Each was going to be a little feature film and, directed by feature guys, but part of how they sold it. And when John Kassir tells the story during this season 2, episode 1, when they did the cast and crew screening for those first 3 episodes of Tales from the Crypt back in the day in the 90s, they were very excited, and there were some press people there. And as the screening starts, I think they're midway through Donner's show, and one of the crew guys turns to another crew guy, says rather loudly, "Wow, this is great TV." And the guy next to him says, "It's not TV, man, it's HBO." In the row ahead were a bunch of HBO execs, and they turned around and went, "Whoa." And that became their slogan. Their slogan, "It's not TV, it's HBO," came out of the screening for the first 3 episodes of Tales from the Crypt, because we were changing the whole idea of what a TV show could be. And so the mandate was to do this thing that had never been done before.
Oh,
That
brilliant,
was
brilliant.
Very cool. Yeah. I do want to say, and to anyone who hasn't listened to the How Not to Make a Movie podcast, it's so interesting. As a horror fan, obviously I connect with it on a certain level, but you really do go into stories that any feature film will run into, these kinds of issues. And so even if you're not a horror fan, a lot of it is so relatable. So I really loved season 1. I've been listening to season 2. So great job. I appreciate it.
Thank you. At the end of the day, it's like this is what it's all about. It's the synergy between you and me, between you and us. We're storytellers, and without some people to listen to our stories, we're just pulling our own putts.
I know.
Nothing wrong with that. Hey, look, a comedian whose name we cannot speak anymore had a great line: "Don't knock masturbation and sex with someone I love." So there's nothing wrong with pud pulling, but there's so much more. There's so much more to be done.
Yeah. Oh, wow. I can understand why this is taking at least 2 series to get your story out. I could talk to you for hours and hours. And I'm sure Vinny can too. Well, next time we do this, Vinny, you will talk more. I
apologize
Sure.
for, yes, I do have a tendency to go on and on.
No, that's fine. And I know as the leader of the ship, I got to direct. And I always tell my listeners that are my guest hosts, you can either be just here as an audience or just join in. So I'm letting everybody for Appetite for Horror as we go forward. Your guest hosting duties is whatever you want it to be. You're just here for a good time. And
you're not here to listen to me. I know that. So
hey,
me neither.
But really and truly, it's the great thing about this world, the podcast world, is it gives us the opportunity to do exactly what you are doing, Brando.
I know.
To have this interplay with the audience, the content providers and the content consumers. We all get to stand there together, and it makes for a really delicious creative experience, because the audience we're so connected to our audience. This is so much better than the way that it was.
Yeah, and I'm coming from terrestrial radio, where you're given 30 seconds to a minute to talk between Led Zeppelin and the Rolling Stones, which has its place, but yeah, you're not going to get this anywhere else. So the podcasting world is wow. No, I'm pro, because there are a lot of shitty ones out there. So I'm privileged that you are to come on this new venture that I'm starting, even though I'm already established in radio. But
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
very
no,
cool that this podcast is for success. Your podcast is successful, but it also reconnected a long lost friendship, and I think that's the most important thing.
We are working together again. Well, we're doing the podcast together. The second
At
season
least on
2
that
is
level.
Gil and I working together. But the cool thing is we're also doing these. We're also working on shows together. We've got a series that we're working on. You know, people approach Gil, they've approached me to redo Tales from the Crypt. Well, Gil and I both know this is an impossibility, but okay, is there a way to work around this? And Gil and I, yeah, hey, we're creative problem solvers. And so we see a way quite clearly to, it's not Tales from the Crypt. It's not an anthology, what we're just about to take into the marketplace. It's a serialized story. If I had to describe the theme, it's you are who you eat. It's about, yeah, it's a world, it's not vampires, it's not zombies, it's something that's been right in front of everybody. And we think it's going to make for a world that will just be, well, I would say it's The Walking Dead meets Buffy the Vampire Slayer plus Sweeney Todd.
Okay.
My wife's going to like the Buffy part. She loves Buffy. So
this would have, it won't have the Cryptkeeper, but it will have the Cryptkeeper soul.
And that's what you're
I look
looking
forward
for.
to that.
So what's the best way to keep in contact? Because I know I initially got in contact with you on Twitter. I'm Al Katz, hownotomakeamovie.com. There's a dash between every word.
Yeah, our website, the Patreon page is AL Katz is our Patreon page is which hosts all of our stuff there. Gosh, hey, I'm also on Mastodon now. Twitter's dead. I'm on Mastodon. Gosh, I don't know I forget my handle off of that, but I'm Alan Katz. Look for Alan. I'm at Alan on my particular instance. I'm that was the coolest thing about moving over to Mastodon. I was the first Alan on my instance, and so I'm at Alan. It's wow.
That's funny.
And considering how we started this about, I can't call myself. I think I'm AL.
And now you own the name.
Finally, I'm Alan.
It's yours. Oh, I love it. I can't wait to see what else you come up with, and I'm glad you guys are working together again. And I'm glad, and you answered a question I was gonna have, being like, how do you feel that all these things are on YouTube? Like, are there residuals to be made? But if there's an issue with the streaming services and licensing, then it would never get seen by anybody, right? So you must be glad that they're all on YouTube for free, I'm assuming. Or they would never be seen?
When you say the episodes?
The episodes and the movies you have to buy, like those,
Yeah.
Those are on like Amazon and everything. But like the TV show itself, like
the episodes are right now that they're on YouTube. Yeah, they're out there and they're for free.
I mean, not the best quality. I mean, if they were ever,
there's a way to do this. This is a Joel thing, and Joel.
We know Joel.
Take care of the business.
Man, well, whatever. Fuck Joel. That's the theme. I don't even know him, and I don't like him after our conversation.
I'll still. He's a great character. I'll rush to his defense.
There you go. Yeah, I'm sure.
The only person in the podcast who we take to task is Sylvester Stallone.
That's a good story, by the way.
Fuck him. Fuck him. What an asshole. What a fucking asshole.
Okay. I'll leave that so people can listen to your podcast to hear the whole story.
No, what a slimy what a bastard.
It's so funny. I forgot. Just going through my Facebook timeline, and I don't know, you see political things, and for whatever reason, I see Frank Stallone's Facebook comment on something. I'm like, bro, are you even alive right now? So I'm wondering about the whole family.
I don't care. I don't agree with Sly's politics. I don't care about any of that. The only thing that my only issue with Sly Stallone is he tried to use our movie, Bordello of Blood, to break up with his girlfriend. He did use our movie. He used us for his own purposes. And he really hurt. You know, it's because of Sly that I had to hire Angie. Angie was that was Sly. That was Joel and Sly. I don't know why we hired. Started telling us. I don't know why we hired Angie. I don't know why we hired Dennis. I know why we hired Erica, and I know why we hired Angie because Sly Stallone insisted, and Joel wanted to keep. They were shooting Assassins in Seattle.
Assassins.
And when it became apparently we were going to be doing Bordello in Vancouver, Sly approached Joel on the set one day. Says, "Hey, Joel, you're going to be seeing a movie in Vancouver. And my girlfriend Angie put it in the movie. We could visit each other, across the border, blah, blah, blah." And because really, Joel just wants to keep Sly happy, as he should. Hey, he's being a good producer on his movie, but he's using my movie to work out his movie. And so to keep Stallone happy, yeah, okay, I'll put your girlfriend in my movie as the villain.
Oh man!
Look, it's and in the podcast, this is no aspersions on Angie. Angie did everything. Angie gives the best performance she possibly can.
Yeah, she was cool in there.
I'm simply saying it was an unfair ask to begin with, and we wanted Robin Givens, and we had read Robin, and
Oh wow,
I think Robin, yeah, that's who we envisioned.
She would have killed it too.
Podcast.
Yeah.
Don't get me started.
Okay, yeah, go listen to How Not to Make a Movie.
And I got to say, God, who's winning this? Oh my God, Portugal is killing Switzerland, apparently.
Oh.
I got to catch the end of it. There's no point catching any of that. And I got a script I got to write here.
Oh,
There you
brilliant.
go.
Well, thank you so much, Alan, for your time. I hope we get to do this again. Obviously, plenty more to talk about. And I'm looking
Brandon,
forward to the table.
Whenever you like, man, give me a shout and let's do this whenever you like.
I thank you very much. And just so people know, the info for that charity read, like where can we find that?
The best place to go is to our website, the how not to make a movie.com, all separated by dashes except the .com, of course. Our Patreon page, Patreon, I'm Alan Katz, I'm A.L. Katz. And that's where it's very simple. People will make their donations to the MPTF, and their donation receipt is their ticket to the charity read.
Okay, very cool.
Thank you for giving us a chance to promote that.
Absolutely. It's funny. Vinny's like, I think Al would do the podcast now. You should get him on soon. He has his charity event coming up. So Vinny, even though we didn't talk a lot, he was my producer for this episode.
There you go.
There you go.
A wingman's
Right.
wingman.
Oh, I love it. And just Vinny, any last questions while we got him? Just want to make sure. Okay.
No, it's been great. Thank you, Alan. I definitely appreciate the time, and it was interesting hearing these new stories. And I'll keep listening to the podcast. I can't wait for every episode that comes out.
Oh, well, thank you. The one coming up with Ed, you'll really enjoy, because Ed's just got the most amazing stories. He's a great assistant because he knew stuff that Gil and I didn't know.
Awesome. So
Very cool.
as I'm starting this podcast, Benny could tell you I like ending with a certain quote. I do something for the Appetite for Distortion podcast in relation to
But you got to
Axl Rose's, his long way to Chinese democracy. When's the next time you see the next episode? I don't know. Soon is the word. So I'm trying out different phrases, how to end this Appetite for Horror podcast. I think it seems appropriate to use something that's similar in the spirit of the Cryptkeeper. So until next time, boys and ghouls. I can't do the laugh like him, though.